Captain Sarah Chun had always hated her call sign. Sticky 6 sounded ridiculous rolling off the tongue of hardened Marines, and every time someone used it over the radio, she could practically hear the smirks in their voices. The name had stuck since her days as a second lieutenant, when she'd accidentally spilled maple syrup all over her gear during a training exercise in Vermont. What should have been a minor embarrassment had somehow followed her through 3 deployments and 2 promotions. Standing in the briefing room at Forward Operating Base Sentinel in eastern Afghanistan, Sarah watched as her platoon filtered in for the morning intelligence update. The room smelled of strong coffee and dust that never seemed to settle, no matter how many times they cleaned. Outside, the Hindu Kush mountains loomed like ancient sentinels against the pale dawn sky. "Morning, Sticky," called out Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, her platoon sergeant and one of the few people who could get away with using the shortened version of her call sign. Maria Rodriguez was a compact woman with sharp eyes and 20 years of Marine Corps experience etched into every line of her weathered face. She'd served under 4 different company commanders, and Sarah knew she was being constantly evaluated against that standard. "Morning, Staff Sergeant," Sarah replied, checking her watch. The rest of the platoon was still filing in. Corporal Jake Morrison, barely 22 but already a veteran of 2 tours. Lance Corporal Amy Park, their communications specialist who could work miracles with broken radios. Private First Class Tony Vasquez, the newest addition to their unit who still jumped at every loud noise, and 8 others who made up the backbone of 3rd Platoon, Alpha Company. The intelligence officer, Lieutenant Colonel Barnes, entered with a folder thick enough to suggest today wouldn't be routine. Barnes was a tall, lean man whose prematurely gray hair spoke to too many deployments and too many difficult decisions. He nodded to Sarah before addressing the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've received intelligence about a high-value target in the village of Karabad, approximately 15 clicks northwest of our position." He pinned a satellite photo to the board, showing a cluster of mud brick buildings nestled in a valley. Ahmad Nazir, suspected bomb maker responsible for at least 6 IED attacks on coalition forces in the past month. Sarah studied the photo, noting the narrow streets and multi-story buildings that could hide a dozen snipers. The village sat in a natural bowl, surrounded by ridges that offered both protection and tactical challenges. One main road led in and out, making it easy to control, but also easy to trap anyone inside. Intel suggests Nazir is meeting with his cell leaders tonight. This is our best shot at taking him alive and rolling up his network. Barnes looked directly at Sarah. 3rd Platoon will lead the operation. You'll have support from 2nd Platoon and air assets on standby. After the briefing, Sarah found herself walking the perimeter of the base, something she always did before a mission. The habit had started during her first deployment, when an older captain told her that the ground would tell her things the maps never could. Today, the rocky soil crunched under her boots as she made her way to the small communications bunker where she could make a private call. The satellite phone crackled as it connected to a number in San Diego. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Hey, stranger." Her younger brother David's voice carried across continents, warm with affection but tinged with worry he tried to hide. "Hey yourself," Sarah replied, settling into the fold-out chair that served as the bunker's only furniture. "How's Mom?" "She's good. Worried about you, obviously. She keeps watching the news and calling me every time there's a report from Afghanistan." David paused. "She bought another care package yesterday. I told her you probably have enough beef jerky to last until 2015, but you know how she is." Sarah smiled, picturing their mother, Linda Chun, bustling around their childhood kitchen in Sacramento, packing boxes with the determination of someone fighting a war through love and cookies. Linda had immigrated from Taiwan as a young woman, working 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school. She'd raised Sarah and David as a single mother after their father died in a construction accident when Sarah was 12. "Tell her I got the last one." The chocolate chip cookies didn't survive the mail system, but everything else was perfect. Sarah watched a convoy of Humvees roll past outside the bunker. "How's the shop?" David owned a small motorcycle repair business that he'd built from nothing. Sarah had helped him with the down payment using her deployment savings, and she was prouder of his success than any of her own military achievements. Business is good. Really good, actually. I hired another mechanic last month. His voice carried the excitement of someone living his dream. But enough about me. How are you really doing, sis? This was the question Sarah had been dreading. How could she explain the weight of command, the responsibility for 12 other lives, the way she lay awake at night running through scenarios where her decisions got people killed? How could she tell him about the jokes behind her back, the way some Marines in other platoons questioned whether a woman could really lead them in combat? I'm fine, David. Really, the guys in my platoon are solid, and we work well together. It wasn't entirely a lie. 3rd Platoon had performed exceptionally in training, and their previous missions had gone smoothly. But Sarah knew that combat had a way of testing bonds that seemed unbreakable in peacetime. Mom wants to know if you're eating enough vegetables. Sarah laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the small bunker. Tell her the chow hall here serves vegetables that would make her proud. Sometimes I can't even identify them, but they're definitely vegetables. They talked for another few minutes about nothing important and everything that mattered. Family gossip, David's latest motorcycle project, their mother's ongoing campaign to get Sarah to find a nice young man and settle down. When the call ended, Sarah sat in the silence, listening to the distant sound of helicopters and the constant hum of generators that provided the soundtrack to life on a forward operating base. The afternoon briefing was more detailed with maps and timing and contingency plans that never survived contact with reality. Sarah listened to the intelligence updates, the weather forecast, and the status reports from supporting units. But her mind kept drifting to the satellite photo of Karabad, trying to imagine the mission from the perspective of the enemy. Ahmad Nazir wasn't just a bomb maker. He was a survivor who'd evaded capture for over a year. He wouldn't be hiding in a village unless he felt secure, unless he had escape routes and early warning systems. The intelligence was good, but intelligence was always incomplete. Sarah had learned that lesson during her first deployment, when her platoon had walked into what should have been an empty building only to find themselves in a firefight that lasted 4 hours. Captain Chun, Corporal Morrison, approached her after the briefing. Jake Morrison had joined the Marines straight out of high school in small-town Montana, driven by a combination of patriotism and a desire to see the world beyond wheat fields. He was quiet, reliable, and had an uncanny ability to spot trouble before it found them. "What's on your mind, Morrison?" "Ma'am, I've been looking at the satellite imagery. That village, it reminds me of Helmand Province, when my last unit got hit pretty hard." He pointed to the photo. "These buildings here, they're positioned to create overlapping fields of fire. And this main road, it's the only way in or out." Sarah nodded. Morrison's instincts were usually sound, and she'd learned to listen when her Marines raised concerns. "What are you thinking?" "I think we're walking into something, ma'am. Maybe not an ambush, but definitely not the easy grab the intel guys are promising." Morrison's blue eyes were serious. "My squad's ready, don't get me wrong. We'll follow you anywhere. But I want to make sure you knew we're all feeling it." "Feeling what?" "That this one's different." After Morrison left, Sarah found herself back at the perimeter, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and purple, beautiful enough to make her temporarily forget about tomorrow's mission. She thought about her call sign again, about the laughter that followed her through hallways and mess halls. What her fellow Marines didn't know was that Sticky 6 had taken on a different meaning for Sarah. In her mind, it wasn't about spilled syrup or clumsiness. It was about being the kind of leader who stuck with her Marines, who didn't abandon them when things got difficult. It was about staying power, about being someone her troops could count on when everything went wrong. The radio crackled in her ear. "Sticky 6, this is Alpha Actual. Report to my office for final mission coordination." Major Thompson was Sarah's company commander, a career Marine who'd come up through the ranks and had little patience for anything that didn't contribute to mission success. His office was spartanly furnished, A desk, 2 chairs, and walls covered with maps and duty rosters. "Sit down, Captain." Thompson's voice was neutral, but Sarah could sense something beneath the surface. "I've been thinking about tomorrow's mission. Sir, you've done good work since you took over 3rd Platoon. Your Marines respect you, and your mission success rate speaks for itself." He paused, drumming his fingers on the desk. "But this operation is different. Higher visibility, more complex. I need to know you're ready for it." Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She'd heard variations of this conversation before. The suggestion that she was competent enough for routine missions but might not be ready for the real challenges. The implication that her gender or her relative youth made her a question mark when things got serious. "Sir, 3rd Platoon is ready. We've trained for this type of operation, and my Marines know their jobs." "I'm not questioning your Marines, Captain. I'm asking about you." Thompson leaned forward. "Command is easier when you're dealing with training exercises and routine patrols. But when bullets start flying, when you have to make life and death decisions in seconds, that's when leaders either step up or step aside." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "With respect, sir, I've been in combat before. My platoon has complete confidence in my leadership, and I have complete confidence in them." Thompson studied her for a long moment. "I hope you're right, Captain, because if this mission goes sideways, it won't be my career on the line. It'll be the lives of 12 Marines who trust you to bring them home." Walking back to her quarters, Sarah felt the weight of tomorrow pressing down on her shoulders. She passed groups of Marines cleaning weapons, writing letters home, or just sitting quietly with their thoughts. Some nodded respectfully as she passed. Others seemed to look right through her. Her quarters were barely large enough for a cot, a small desk, and a footlocker that held everything she owned in Afghanistan. On the desk was a framed photo of her family taken the Christmas before her deployment. Her mother beaming in the center, David with his arm around Sarah's shoulders, all of them tan and happy in the California sunshine. Sarah picked up the photo, remembering that day. They'd driven to the beach in San Diego, eating fish tacos and watching surfers ride waves that seemed impossibly large. Her mother had insisted on taking dozens of pictures, as if she could preserve that perfect day forever. "Promise me you'll be careful," her mother had said as they walked along the sand. "Promise me you'll come home." Sarah had made that promise easily, full of confidence and training and youth. Now, sitting in a plywood shack on the other side of the world, she understood how fragile such promises could be. She opened her laptop and began typing an email to David, then stopped. What could she say? That she was scared? That command felt lonelier than she'd expected? That sometimes she lay awake, wondering if she was really as ready as she pretended to be? Instead, she closed the laptop and picked up her weapon for the nightly cleaning ritual that every Marine performed religiously. The M4 carbine was an extension of herself now, familiar as her own hands. She field stripped it methodically, cleaning each component with the automatic precision of thousands of repetitions. A knock on her door interrupted the routine. "Come in." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee that smelled infinitely better than anything the mess hall produced. Maria had a talent for finding the good stuff, probably through connections Sarah didn't want to know about. "Thought you might need this, ma'am." Rodriguez handed her a cup and settled into the room's only chair. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, 2 professional soldiers sharing the quiet space between missions. Rodriguez had been in Sarah's corner since day one, running interference with the senior enlisted Marines who might otherwise have tested a young female officer more aggressively. "How are the Marines feeling about tomorrow?" Sarah asked. "They're ready. Morrison's got a squad dialed in. Parts comms are solid. And even Vasquez is starting to look like a real Marine instead of a scared kid." Rodriguez sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "They trust you, Captain. That's worth more than perfect planning. And you? Do you trust me?" Rodriguez looked at her directly, brown eyes serious. "Ma'am, I've served under officers who had twice your experience and half your sense. I've seen captains make decisions based on what looked good in their fitness reports instead of what was right for their Marines." She paused. You're not perfect, but you're real. And when push comes to shove, I'd rather follow someone real than someone perfect. After Rodriguez left, Sarah sat alone with her thoughts and the distant sound of the bass settling into its nighttime rhythm. Guard posts would be manned, patrols would walk the perimeter, and Marines would sleep fitfully on narrow cots, dreaming of home or combat or both. Tomorrow would bring Karabad, Ahmad Nazir, and whatever waited in that cluster of mud brick buildings. Sarah had studied the maps, reviewed the intelligence, and briefed her Marines until every detail was burned into their memories. But she knew from experience that plans were just starting points. Reality had a way of improvising its own script. She thought about her call sign one more time, about the weight of command and the expectations that came with gold bars on her collar. Sticky 6 might sound ridiculous to some, but Sarah had decided to make it mean something. She would be the kind of leader who stuck with her Marines, no matter what tomorrow brought. The base grew quieter as the night deepened, but Sarah remained awake, thinking about promises made to worried mothers and the responsibility of bringing 12 Marines home safely from a village that might hold more than they bargained for. The pre-dawn darkness felt heavier than usual as 3rd Platoon prepared for the mission to Karabad. Sarah watched her Marines conduct their final equipment checks with a methodical precision that separated professionals from amateurs. Each weapon was inspected twice, every piece of gear secured and accounted for. The ritual had an almost ceremonial quality, like knights preparing for battle. Lance Corporal Park crouched beside her radio equipment, testing frequencies and backup channels with the concentration of a surgeon. Amy Park had grown up in Los Angeles as the daughter of Korean immigrants who'd sacrificed everything for their children's education. She'd shocked her family by enlisting instead of going to college, but her gift for electronics and communications had made her invaluable to the platoon. "Comms check, Captain," Park reported, her voice crisp in the pre-dawn air. "Primary and secondary frequencies clear. Air support is standing by on Channel 7, and we've got solid satellite coverage for GPS navigation." Across the staging area, Corporal Morrison briefed his fire team one last time. Jake Morrison had the kind of steady presence that made other Marines naturally look to him for leadership. His team consisted of Private First Class Vasquez, who still looked young enough to be asked for ID at a movie theater, Lance Corporal Williams, a quiet kid from rural Georgia who could shoot the wings off a fly, and Private Chun, whose shared last name with Sarah had led to endless jokes about family connections. "Remember, we go in quiet and fast," Morrison told his team. "Nazir might run, but he won't fight if he can help it. These bomb makers aren't usually trigger pullers." He checked his watch. "We stack up outside the target building, wait for Sticky 6 signal, then we own every room until the package is secured." Sarah felt the familiar pre-mission mixture of anxiety and anticipation coursing through her veins. She'd learned during her first deployment that the waiting was always worse than the action. Once bullets started flying, training took over, and there wasn't time for fear. But in these quiet moments before insertion, every possible disaster scenario played out in vivid detail. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez appeared at her elbow, somehow managing to look completely relaxed despite carrying 60 pounds of gear. "Transport's ready when you are, Captain. Both birds are fueled, and the pilots are itching to fly." The helicopters sat on the landing pad like sleeping insects, their rotors drooping in the still air. Sarah could see the pilots running through their pre-flight checks, testing control surfaces and engine parameters. Flying into a potential combat zone required a different kind of courage than ground operations. Pilots had to trust their aircraft completely while carrying precious cargo in the form of Marine infantry. 5 minutes, Sarah called out, and the controlled chaos of final preparations intensified. Marines shouldered their packs, chambered rounds, and formed into their designated chalk formations. The sound of gear shifting and quiet conversations created a low murmur that seemed to vibrate through the ground. As they boarded the helicopters, Sarah caught sight of Major Thompson watching from the command post. His expression was unreadable in the dim light, but she could feel his scrutiny like a physical weight. This mission would either validate her leadership or confirm his doubts about her readiness for complex operations. The flight to Karabad took 37 minutes, following a route designed to avoid known enemy positions and early warning posts. Sarah sat in the crew chief seat, headphones crackling with radio chatter from the pilot and air traffic control. Below them, the Afghan landscape rolled past like a moonscape, all browns and grays punctuated by the occasional green of an irrigated field. 2 minutes out, the pilot announced over the intercom, "LZ looks clear, but we'll keep the engines hot just in case you need a quick extraction." Sarah keyed her radio. "All stations, this is Sticky 6. 2 minutes to insertion. Remember your assignments and watch your sectors." She switched to the command frequency. "Overwatch, this is Sticky 6. Request final intelligence update." Sticky 6, Overwatch. No change to the situation. Target building remains occupied. No movement on approach routes. You are cleared hot for mission execution. The helicopters flared as they approached the landing zone, a flat area of scrub brush about 2 kilometers from Karabad. Sarah could see the village in the distance, a cluster of lights that looked deceptively peaceful in the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere in those buildings, Ahmad Nazir was presumably sleeping, unaware that 12 Marines were about to change his morning routine permanently. 3rd Platoon deployed from the helicopters with practiced efficiency, each Marine moving to their assigned position in the patrol formation. The sound of the rotors faded quickly as the aircraft departed, leaving them alone in the Afghan countryside with nothing but starlight and their mission. The patrol to Karabad took an hour of careful movement through terrain that seemed designed to break ankles and tear equipment. Sarah led from the front, using hand signals to communicate with her point man while constantly scanning for signs of enemy observation or IED emplacements. The intelligence briefing had mentioned possible mines on the approach routes, and every step required attention to ground conditions and potential threats. Lance Corporal Williams, serving as point man for this operation, moved with the fluid grace of someone who'd grown up hunting deer in Georgia forests. His ability to read terrain and spot danger had saved the platoon from at least 2 IED discoveries during previous missions. Tonight, he paused frequently to examine suspicious patches of disturbed earth or unusual objects that might conceal explosives. As they approached the village outskirts, Sarah could smell cooking fires and hear the distant sound of a diesel generator. Karabad was waking up for another day, and normal life was beginning despite the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere, women were probably preparing breakfast while children slept peacefully, unaware that armed Marines were creeping through their neighborhood. The target building stood at the corner of 2 narrow streets, a 3-story structure with thick walls and small windows that would make clearing it challenging. Intelligence had indicated that Nazir was staying on the 2nd floor, in a room that faced away from the main street. But intelligence was always incomplete, and Sarah knew that assumptions could get people killed. "Overwatch positions," Sarah whispered into her radio, and 2 Marines peeled off to establish observation posts that would cover the building's exits. Morrison took his fire team to the back door, while Sarah prepared to lead the main assault through the front entrance. The building's front door was solid wood reinforced with metal strips, designed more for privacy than security. Williams produced a small explosive charge that would blow the hinges without bringing down the entire structure. The goal was speed and surprise, not destruction. 30 seconds, Sarah announced quietly, and she could feel the platoon's energy shift into combat mode. Heart rates increased, breathing became more controlled, and every sense sharpened to combat awareness. This was the moment when training either worked perfectly or revealed gaps that could prove fatal. The explosion was surprisingly quiet, more of a sharp crack than the thunderous boom Sarah had expected. The door sagged inward, creating an opening wide enough for Marines to flow through in practiced room-clearing formation. Williams went first, followed by Park and 2 other Marines who immediately secured the ground floor. "Clear," Williams called out, his voice echoing strangely in the narrow stairwell that led to the second floor. Sarah could hear movement above them, the sound of people awakening to the reality that their building was under assault. The staircase was a tactical nightmare, narrow, with a sharp turn halfway up that created a fatal funnel for anyone climbing toward prepared defenders. Sarah motioned for Williams to lead the way, knowing that the first Marine up those stairs would be completely exposed for several crucial seconds. A gunshot echoed from the second floor, followed by shouting in Pashto. Someone had decided to fight rather than surrender, which complicated the mission significantly. Sarah's primary goal was to take Nazir alive, but her greater responsibility was to bring her Marines home safely. "Contact second floor," Williams reported, pressing himself against the stairwell wall as another shot rang out. At least one shooter, possibly more. They've got the high ground and good cover. Sarah's mind raced through options. They could call for air support, but that would likely kill everyone in the building, including potential intelligence sources. They could wait for the shooters to run out of ammunition, but that gave the enemy time to destroy documents or escape through routes the Marines hadn't identified. "Rodriguez, take your team around back. See if Morrison needs help securing the rear exit." Sarah keyed her radio to the command frequency. "Overwatch, this is Sticky 6. We have contact at the target building. Request immediate air support on standby." The response crackled back through static. "Sticky 6, Overwatch. Air support standing by, but be advised there are civilians in the adjacent buildings. You are cleared to engage with small arms only unless situation becomes critical." Another gunshot from upstairs, this one closer to the stairwell. Someone was moving around up there, possibly trying to reach a window that would allow escape or a better firing position. Sarah realized she was facing exactly the kind of split-second decision that could define her career and her Marines' lives. "Park, can you get eyes on the second-floor windows from your position?" "Negative, Captain. I've got a good view of the street, but the building's blocking my line of sight to the upper windows." Sarah made her decision. "Williams, Rodriguez with me. Park, you maintain communications, and watch our 6. We're going up." The climb to the second floor felt like it took hours, though Sarah knew from her watch that barely 2 minutes had elapsed since the first gunshot. Each step exposed them to potential fire from above, and the narrow stairwell amplified every sound until their breathing seemed thunderously loud. At the top of the stairs, Sarah found herself facing a hallway with 3 doors, all closed. Intelligence had suggested that Nazir was in the room at the end of the hall, but intelligence had been wrong before. Behind any of those doors could be armed fighters, terrified civilians, or the high-value target they'd come to capture. Williams moved to the first door, pressing his ear against the wood to listen for movement inside. His hand signals indicated silence, but that could mean the room was empty or that whoever was inside was waiting quietly for Marines to enter their kill zone. The sound of splintering wood came from the far end of the hall, followed by shouting and what sounded like furniture being overturned. Someone was trying to escape through a window or barricade themselves for a last stand. Sarah felt the mission slipping away from her control, turning into exactly the kind of chaotic firefight that created casualties and failed objectives. "Rodriguez, can you get around to the windows on the outside?" "Working on it, Captain. Morrison's team has the back exit secured, but there's a lot of activity in the alley. Multiple individuals moving away from the building." Sarah realized that Nazir might already be gone, that they were risking lives to capture an empty room while the real target escaped into the maze of Karabad's narrow streets. But they had to be sure, had to clear every room and confirm what intelligence had told them. The first door opened to reveal a small storage room filled with sacks of grain and household supplies. No people, no weapons, no intelligence value. Williams moved to the second door, while Sarah covered the hallway that seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. Behind the second door, they found a family, an older man, a woman, and 2 small children who looked terrified by the sudden appearance of armed foreigners in their home. The man was speaking rapidly in Pashto, His hands raised to show he was unarmed. Sarah knew enough of the language to understand that he was saying they were just farmers, that they had nothing to do with any fighters. Rodriguez, we've got civilians. Family of 4, non-combatant. Sarah looked at the frightened faces and felt the weight of command in a new way. These people were caught in the middle of someone else's war, their home invaded by strangers with guns who spoke a language they didn't understand. The third door was where they found Ahmad Nazir. He was older than his intelligence photos suggested, with gray threading through his black beard and eyes that held the weariness of someone who'd spent too many years running from consequences. When Sarah and Williams burst through the door, Nazir was sitting calmly at a small table, his hands folded as if he'd been waiting for them. "You are American Marines," he said in accented but clear English. "I have been expecting you." The room was neat and sparse, with few personal belongings and no obvious weapons. A window stood open, and Sarah could see scuff marks on the sill that suggested someone had recently climbed out. Nazir had let his companions escape while he waited to face capture alone. "Ahmad Nazir, you're under arrest as a suspected terrorist operative," Sarah announced, though she wasn't sure if the legal niceties mattered in a mud brick room in rural Afghanistan. "You have the right to remain silent." Nazir smiled slightly. "Captain, I think your rights and my rights are very different things in this place. But yes, I am Ahmad Nazir, and yes, I will come with you peacefully." Williams quickly searched the room while Sarah kept her weapon trained on Nazir. The search revealed maps, documents written in Arabic and Pashto, and what appear to be technical diagrams for improvised explosive devices. The intelligence had been accurate about Nazir's location and activities. "Jackpot," Williams reported quietly. "We've got enough paperwork here to keep the intelligence guys busy for months." As they prepared to evacuate the building with their prisoner, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anticlimax. The mission had gone according to plan, more or less. Nazir was captured, valuable intelligence had been recovered, and no Marines had been seriously injured. But something felt incomplete, as if she'd missed an important detail. "Rodriguez, what's the status on those individuals who left through the back?" "Long gone, Captain." Morrison's team saw at least 3 people escape through the alley system. Could have been associates, could have been neighbors who got spooked by the gunfire. Sarah made the decision to extract immediately rather than pursue the escaped individuals. Her primary mission was complete, and chasing shadows through unfamiliar streets would expose her Marines to unnecessary risk. Sometimes successful leadership meant knowing when to declare victory and move on. The patrol back to the extraction point took longer than the approach, slowed by the need to secure Nazir and the recovered documents. Sarah found herself walking alongside her prisoner, studying his calm demeanor and wondering what motivated someone to spend their life building bombs designed to kill strangers. "You are younger than I expected for a Marine captain," Nazir observed as they picked their way through the rocky terrain. "And you're a woman. This is unusual in your military?" Sarah didn't respond, but she wondered what Nazir saw when he looked at her. Did he see a professional soldier doing her job, or did he see something else? Did her gender change how he viewed the capture, make it somehow less legitimate in his mind? The extraction helicopters were waiting at the designated landing zone, rotors already turning as the pilots prepared for immediate departure. Sarah felt the familiar relief that came with successful mission completion, but she also felt the weight of questions that had no easy answers. As 3rd Platoon loaded into the aircraft with their prisoner and capture documents, Sarah took one last look at the Afghan landscape. Somewhere out there, other bomb makers were probably already planning to replace Ahmad Nazir. Other Marines would conduct other raids, and the cycle would continue until politicians and diplomats found a way to end what soldiers could only temporarily disrupt. The flight back to Forward Operating Base Sentinel gave Sarah time to process what had happened and what it meant for her leadership and her Marines' confidence in her abilities. The mission had been successful by any reasonable measure, but she knew that success in counterinsurgency operations was often temporary and always incomplete. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez settled into the seat beside her, shouting over the helicopter noise, "Clean operation, Captain. Your Marines performed exactly the way you trained them." Sarah nodded, but her mind was already moving to the after-action review, the paperwork, and the intelligence debrief that would follow. Success in combat was measured not just by mission accomplishment, but by bringing everyone home safely and learning lessons that would keep them alive during the next operation. As the base came into view, Sarah realized that her call sign might be starting to mean something different to her Marines. Sticky 6 could represent the kind of leader who stuck with her troops through complex situations and brought them home safely. Maybe the laughter would continue, but perhaps it would carry a different tone now. 3 weeks after the Nazir operation, 3rd Platoon found themselves manning Observation Post Bravo, a lonely outpost perched on a ridge overlooking the Kunar Valley. The position had been established 6 months earlier as part of a larger strategy to interdict Taliban supply lines, but it felt more like punishment duty than strategic importance. Sarah stood in the main bunker, studying intelligence reports that painted an increasingly grim picture. Taliban activity in the region had increased significantly since the Nazir capture, suggesting that his arrest had triggered a response rather than disrupting enemy operations. New IED attacks were being reported daily, and American patrols were facing more frequent and more sophisticated ambushes. "Captain, we've got movement in Sector 7, reported Lance Corporal Williams from his position behind the observation scope. "Looks like a vehicle convoy. 3 trucks heading northeast on the main road." Sarah moved to the scope and adjusted the focus. Through the heat shimmer rising from the valley floor, she could make out 3 Toyota pickup trucks traveling in a loose formation. The vehicles themselves weren't unusual. Everyone in Afghanistan drove Toyota pickups. But the spacing and speed suggested military discipline rather than civilian transport. "How many personnel?" Sarah asked, making notes in the logbook that documented every significant observation. "Hard to tell from this distance, but each truck appears to be carrying multiple passengers. Could be anywhere from 9 to 15 individuals total." The radio crackled with an incoming transmission. "Bravo Post, this is Overwatch. We're tracking the same convoy you're observing. Intelligence suggests possible high-value targets in the group." Sarah keyed her microphone. "Overwatch, Bravo Post. Can you provide specifics on these targets?" "Negative, Bravo Post. Source protection prevents detailed disclosure. But you should consider this convoy priority intelligence collection." Sarah felt the familiar frustration of operating with incomplete information. Intelligence sources were protected for good reasons, but Marines on the ground needed enough information to make life and death decisions. The balance between operational security and tactical effectiveness was never perfect. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez appeared in the bunker doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression that meant she had concerns to discuss. Maria Rodriguez had developed an uncanny ability to sense when operations were about to become complicated. "Captain, I've been monitoring the radio traffic from other positions in the valley," Rodriguez said, settling beside Sarah's chair. "There's been a lot of movement in the past 48 hours. More than usual, and all of it seems coordinated." Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully. The observation post location at high altitude meant that mornings and evenings were surprisingly cold, even in the middle of the Afghan summer. "What kind of movement?" "Foot patrols, vehicle convoys, even some mounted groups moving at night. It's like they're positioning for something big." Rodriguez pointed to a map of the valley. "All the movement seems to be converging on grid squares that would give them optimal positions to interdict our supply routes." The main supply route to forward operating base Sentinel ran through the valley below, a winding road that represented the lifeline for 3 American outposts. If Taliban forces could effectively cut that road, they could isolate hundreds of Marines and soldiers until air resupply or reinforcement operations could be organized. "Have you shared this assessment with higher headquarters?" "I reported the observations, but I don't think anyone's connecting the dots yet." Individual sightings don't seem significant until you plot them on a map. And look at the big picture. Sarah studied the map more carefully, noting the positions where friendly forces had reported enemy contact in recent days. Rodriguez was right. The pattern suggested a coordinated effort to position forces for a major operation. But major operations required leadership, planning, and resources that the Taliban cell in this region wasn't supposed to possess. Rodriguez, give me a secure line to Major Thompson. I think we need to brief this up the chain immediately. While Rodriguez worked to establish communications, Sarah continued monitoring the convoy through the observation scope. The three vehicles had stopped at a checkpoint where the main road crossed a smaller trail leading into the mountains. She could see figures moving around the trucks, but the distance made it impossible to identify individuals or determine their activities. Corporal Morrison climbed into the bunker, carrying his rifle and wearing the dusty uniform that was the inevitable result of manning positions on the ridge. Jake Morrison had drawn the assignment of establishing listening posts farther down the ridge, positions that would provide early warning if enemy forces attempted to approach the observation post. "Captain, we got a problem with LP-3, Morrison reported. Chun and Vasquez are reporting hearing movement in the ravine below their position. Sounds like a large group moving on foot, trying to stay concealed. Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the sensation that always accompanied the transition from routine observation to potential combat. Listening Post 3 was positioned to cover the most likely approach route for any ground assault on their position. If enemy forces were moving in that area, 3rd Platoon could find themselves under attack within the hour. How large a group are we talking about? Chun estimates at least 20 individuals, possibly more. They're moving slowly and carefully, which suggests they're trying to avoid detection. Morrison consulted his notes. The sound pattern indicates they're carrying heavy equipment, possibly mortars or heavy machine guns. Sarah made her decision quickly. Rodriguez, belay that call to Major Thompson for now. Morrison, get Chun and Vasquez back here immediately. We're pulling in all the listening posts and consolidating our defensive positions. The observation posts have been designed to accommodate a reinforced squad, not a full platoon, which meant that defensive preparations required creativity and improvisation. Sarah had studied the position extensively during their 3-week occupation, identifying fields of fire, dead space, and potential weak points that attackers might exploit. Lance Corporal Park appeared with her radio equipment, already monitoring multiple frequencies for any indication of friendly forces in the area. Amy Park had become the platoon's link to the outside world, maintaining communications with higher headquarters while also tracking the position and status of supporting units. "Captain, I'm picking up radio chatter on Taliban frequencies," Park reported, adjusting her headphones to filter out background static. "I can't understand the language, but the volume and pattern suggest they're coordinating something significant." Sarah nodded grimly. Enemy forces rarely used radios extensively unless they were confident that any response would come too late to affect their plans. The communication activity confirmed her growing suspicion that 3rd Platoon was about to face something more serious than routine harassment. The first mortar round landed 50 meters short of the observation post, sending up a geyser of dirt and rock that rattled windows in the bunker. Sarah felt the concussion through the ground beneath her feet, a physical reminder that the tactical situation had just changed dramatically. "Incoming!" Morrison shouted, though his warning was unnecessary. Every Marine in the position was already moving to predetermined fighting positions, grabbing weapons and ammunition with the automatic responses drilled into them through countless hours of training. Sarah keyed her radio to the emergency frequency. "Overwatch, Bravo Post. We're taking mortar fire and expect imminent ground assault. Request immediate air support and quick reaction force." The response came back through static and the sound of additional mortar rounds impacting around the position. "Bravo Post, Overwatch. Air support is 45 minutes out. QRF is preparing to mount up, but they're looking at a 2-hour timeline to reach your position. 2 hours was an eternity in combat, and Sarah knew that 3rd Platoon would have to hold their position without support for far longer than any textbook would recommend. She felt the weight of command more heavily than ever, knowing that every decision she made in the next few hours could determine whether her Marines went home to their families. Williams called out from his fighting position, "Captain, I've got eyes on the assault force." Approximately 30 to 40 individuals moving up the ridge in 2 separate groups. They're carrying crew-served weapons and what looks like satchel charges. Satchel charges meant that the attackers were planning to get close enough to breach the observation post's defensive barriers. This wasn't harassment fire designed to disrupt operations. This was a determined assault intended to overrun the position and eliminate its defenders. Sarah moved from fighting position to fighting position, checking on her Marines and ensuring that ammunition distribution was adequate for a sustained firefight. Private First Class Vasquez looked pale, but determined, gripping his rifle with the intensity of someone who understood that his survival depended on his performance in the next few hours. "Vasquez, remember your breathing control and sight picture," Sarah told him, keeping her voice calm and professional. "These guys are good, but we're better trained and we've got better positions. Trust your training and watch your sector." The sound of automatic weapons fire erupted from the ridge below as the Taliban assault force encountered the observation post's outer perimeter defenses. Sarah had positioned claymore mines and trip flares along the most likely approach routes, hoping to channel attackers into predetermined kill zones. "They're in the wire," Morrison reported, referring to the concertina wire barriers that formed the position's first line of defense. First Assault Group is approximately 200 meters out and moving fast. Sarah realized that the Taliban commander was competent and aggressive, pressing the attack despite taking casualties from the perimeter defenses. This wasn't the work of a local cell leader. Someone with military experience was coordinating the assault. Rodriguez appeared at her elbow, somehow managing to look calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "Captain, I think this is connected to the Nasir operation. Someone wants payback for that capture, and they've decided to make an example of us." Sarah keyed her radio to the platoon net. "All stations, this is Sticky 6. Remember your training, watch your ammunition expenditure, and maintain communication. We hold this position until relieved." The first Taliban fighters reached the inner perimeter just as the sun began to set behind the mountains, creating the kind of mixed lighting conditions that favored attackers over defenders. Sarah could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions as her Marines engaged targets that appeared and disappeared among the rocks and scrub brush. Lance Corporal Park was alternating between her radio duties and firing her rifle at targets of opportunity, proving that communication specialists could be infantry Marines when circumstances required. "Captain, I've got Overwatch on the line. They want to know if we can mark our positions for air support. Tell them we're too close to the enemy positions for danger close missions. We need air support to hit their staging areas and prevent reinforcements from reaching the assault force." Another wave of mortar fire began falling on the observation post, this time with improved accuracy that suggested the enemy had observers adjusting fires. Sarah felt the bunker shake as a round impacted directly on the roof, showering everyone inside with dust and debris. Williams called out from his fighting position. "Second Assault Group is moving around to the north side. Looks like they're trying to flank us while the first group keeps us busy." Sarah realized that the Taliban commander was employing classic small unit tactics, using multiple approaches to divide the defender's attention and create opportunities for penetration. She had to make a decision about how to distribute her limited forces to counter the threat. Morrison, take Williams and Chun. Set up an L-shaped ambush on the north approach. Rodriguez, you maintain the main defensive line with Park and Vasquez. I'll coordinate fires and communications from the bunker. As her Marines moved to their new positions, Sarah found herself alone in the bunker with the radio and the growing realization that 3rd Platoon was facing the most serious test of their deployment. The observation post had seemed like routine duty, but Someone had turned it into a focal point for a coordinated attack that could determine the balance of power in the entire valley. The radio crackled with an incoming transmission from Major Thompson. Bravo Post, Alpha Actual. What's your ammunition status and casualty report? Alpha Actual, Bravo Post. No casualties at this time. Ammunition holding steady, but we're facing a determined assault by a significant force. Sarah ducked as another mortar round impacted nearby. Estimate 40 to 50 attackers with crew-served weapons and indirect fire support. Roger, Bravo Post. Air support is still 30 minutes out, but I'm launching the QRF early. They'll reach your position in 90 minutes. 90 minutes was still a very long time, but it represented hope that 3rd Platoon wouldn't have to fight alone indefinitely. Sarah found herself thinking about her conversation with David, about promises made to worried mothers, and about the responsibility of bringing her Marines home safely from situations that weren't supposed to be dangerous. The sound of explosions from the north side of the position indicated that Morrison's ambush had engaged the flanking force. Sarah could hear the distinctive sound of American M4 carbines mixed with the sharper crack of AK-47s, the universal soundtrack of small unit combat in Afghanistan. Rodriguez's voice came over the radio from the main defensive line. Sticky 6 were holding them at the wire, but they're persistent. These guys know what they're doing, and they're not breaking contact easily. Sarah realized that her call sign was taking on new meaning for her Marines. In this moment, Sticky 6 represented someone who would stick with them through the most difficult fight of their deployment, who wouldn't abandon them when the situation became desperate. The jokes about spilled syrup seemed very far away now. The attack had been raging for over an hour when Sarah realized they were in serious trouble. Taliban fighters had managed to breach the outer perimeter on 2 sides, and ammunition was running lower than she'd hoped. Private First Class Vasquez had taken shrapnel from a mortar round, though he was still fighting from his position with a field dressing wrapped around his left arm. Captain, Morrison's voice crackled over the radio from the north side ambush position. We've got movement in the ravine. Looks like a 3rd assault group, maybe 15 to 20 fighters. They're carrying what appears to be explosive devices. Sarah felt her heart sink. A 3rd assault group meant that the Taliban commander had more resources than intelligence had suggested, and explosive devices likely meant they were planning to breach the observation post's main bunker. If that happened, 3rd Platoon would lose their communications hub and command center. She keyed her radio to respond to Morrison, but before she could speak, Lance Corporal Park grabbed her arm. Captain, I'm getting something weird on the radio. There's someone transmitting on our frequency, but it's not coming from any of our units. Sarah took the handset and listened to a voice speaking in clear, unaccented English. Bravo Post, this is Nomad 7. I'm in Overwatch position approximately 800 meters northeast of your location. I can provide precision fires on enemy positions if you could designate targets. Sarah and Rodriguez exchanged glances. There were no American units designated as Nomad 7 on any of the operational charts they'd been given, but the voice sounded professional, calm, and American. In the middle of a firefight, Sarah had to make a decision about whether to trust an unknown element or ignore potential assistance. Nomad 7, Bravo Post. Can you authenticate with grid coordinates and call signs? Negative on authentication, Bravo Post. I'm operating under different authority, but I can see your position clearly, and I have direct line of sight to the assault groups threatening your perimeter. Williams called out from his fighting position. Captain, the main assault group is massing for another rush. They're about 100 meters out and coming hard. Sarah made her decision. Nomad 7, Bravo Post. I need immediate suppression fires on enemy positions to my south and west. Danger close authorization granted. Roger, Bravo Post. Observe. The first shot came 3 seconds later, a single rifle round that struck one of the Taliban fighters preparing for the assault. Sarah watched through her scope as the man dropped instantly, a clean shot from an impossible distance that demonstrated the kind of marksmanship she'd only seen in training demonstrations. The second shot followed immediately, taking down another fighter who had been directing the assault. The Taliban formation wavered as their leadership disappeared with surgical precision. Sarah realized she was witnessing something extraordinary, a sniper capable of making kill shots at extreme range under combat conditions. Nomad 7, Bravo Post. Outstanding shooting. Can you engage the mortar position in Sector 4? Working on it, Bravo Post. Give me 30 seconds to acquire the target. Rodriguez appeared at Sarah's shoulder, her eyes wide with amazement. Captain, whoever this is, they're incredible. I've never seen shooting like that. The mortar position that had been harassing 3rd Platoon for over an hour suddenly went silent. Through her scope, Sarah could see 2 bodies near the mortar tube, both dropped by shots she hadn't even heard. The mysterious sniper was operating at a level that bordered on supernatural. Morrison's voice came over the radio. Sticky 6, the flanking group is pulling back. They took heavy casualties from someone, but it wasn't us. Someone else is engaging them from a position we can't see. Sarah felt a surge of hope for the first time since the attack began. Whoever Nomad 7 was, they were systematically dismantling the Taliban assault with precision that was changing the entire tactical situation. But questions remained about identity, authority, and what kind of support they could expect. Nomad 7, Bravo Post. What's your unit and operational authority? I need to know who you are. A long pause followed before the voice responded. Bravo Post. I'm operating under classified authority. Your need to know is limited to mission completion. Continue your defensive operations, and let me work. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Classified authority could mean special operations, CIA, or any number of units that operated in legal gray areas. But in the middle of a firefight, Sarah's primary concern was keeping her Marines alive, not understanding bureaucratic complications. Lance Corporal Park was monitoring multiple radio frequencies, trying to maintain communications with higher headquarters while tracking the evolving tactical situation. Captain, I'm getting reports from other positions in the valley. Apparently, Taliban forces are breaking contact and withdrawing from multiple locations simultaneously. Sarah realized that the attack on Observation Post Bravo might have been part of a larger coordinated offensive that was now falling apart due to the intervention of their mysterious guardian angel. The implications were staggering. Someone with extraordinary capabilities was operating in their area without their knowledge, and that someone had just saved 3rd Platoon from potential annihilation. The radio crackled again. Bravo Post, Nomad 7. Enemy forces are withdrawing from all approach routes. I count 12 confirmed kills and multiple wounded. The threat to your position has been neutralized. Williams confirmed the assessment from his observation position. Captain, they're pulling back fast. Looks like they're carrying their wounded and leaving their heavy equipment behind. Sarah felt the familiar mixture of relief and anticlimax that followed successful combat operations. 3rd Platoon had survived their most serious test, but they'd done so with help from someone whose identity and mission remained completely mysterious. Nomad 7, Bravo Post. Request you maintain Overwatch while we conduct battle damage assessment and prepare for extraction. Roger, Bravo Post. I'll maintain position until your relief forces arrive. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez began organizing the platoon for post-combat procedures, casualty assessment, ammunition inventory, and preparation for the quick reaction force that would arrive within the hour. Private Vasquez was the only serious casualty, though his shrapnel wounds were painful rather than life-threatening. As Sarah moved through the position, checking on her Marines, she found herself thinking about the transformation she'd witnessed in her troops during the firefight. Vasquez had continued fighting despite his wounds. Park had maintained communications while engaging targets with a rifle. Morrison had led his fire team with calm professionalism under extreme pressure. Most importantly, none of them had questioned her leadership or suggested that someone else should be making the tactical decisions. Whatever doubts they might have had about following a female officer into combat had been resolved by shared danger and successful mission completion. The sound of helicopters approaching from the south announced the arrival of the Quick Reaction Force. Sarah felt a familiar surge of emotion watching the aircraft approach, knowing that relief was finally at hand for her exhausted Marines. Major Thompson was aboard the lead helicopter, arriving to personally assess the situation and debrief 3rd Platoon on their engagement. Sarah could see him scanning the observation post as his aircraft circled before landing, noting the evidence of intense fighting and the Taliban equipment abandoned during their withdrawal. "Captain Shun," Thompson said as he climbed out of the helicopter, "I need a complete debrief on what happened here. Intelligence is reporting Taliban withdrawals throughout the valley, and we need to understand what triggered the change in their operational pattern." Sarah gave him a concise summary of the attack and the intervention by the mysterious sniper. Though she could see skepticism in Thompson's expression as she described shots made at impossible ranges by an unknown operator. "Sir, I know how it sounds, but I witnessed the shooting personally. Whoever this was, they had capabilities beyond anything I've seen in conventional units." Thompson studied the positions where Taliban bodies lay scattered around the observation post perimeter. The wounds were consistent with high-velocity rifle rounds fired by someone with exceptional marksmanship skills. But the ranges involved seemed to exceed human capabilities. "Captain, did this Nomad 7 provide any information about their unit or mission?" "Negative, sir. They claimed classified authority and declined to provide additional details." As the QRF secured the area and prepared to evacuate 3rd Platoon, Sarah found herself scanning the ridges where their guardian angel had presumably been positioned. 800 meters was an extreme range for accurate rifle fire, especially under combat conditions with moving targets and limited visibility. Lance Corporal Park approached with her radio equipment. "Captain, I tried to raise Nomad 7 on the frequency they used earlier. No response. It's like they were never there." The flight back to forward operating base Sentinel gave Sarah time to process what had happened and what it meant for her understanding of the war in Afghanistan. Someone with extraordinary capabilities was operating in their area, someone with the authority to intervene in Marine operations, but not the obligation to explain their presence. Major Thompson conducted his debrief immediately upon their return, questioning each Marine about their observations of the mysterious sniper's activities. The stories were consistent. Shots of incredible accuracy at ranges that challenge belief, professional communications discipline, and complete tactical awareness of the battlefield situation. "Captain," Thompson said privately after the formal debrief, "I've made inquiries through intelligence channels about this Nomad 7. No one will confirm or deny their existence, but the message I'm getting is that we should be grateful for the assistance and avoid asking too many questions." Sarah nodded, understanding that some aspects of military operations remained classified for reasons beyond her need to know. But she also understood that 3rd Platoon had been saved by someone whose identity would probably remain forever mysterious. 2 weeks later, Sarah received orders transferring her to a staff position at regiment headquarters. The official reason was her exceptional performance during the Nazir operation and her leadership during the defense of Observation Post Bravo. But Sarah suspected that her encounter with classified operations had made her a security risk that needed to be managed carefully. On her last day with 3rd Platoon, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez presented her with a gift from the Marines, a small metal plaque bearing her call sign and the dates of her command. But instead of Sticky 6, the engraving read Steady 6, reflecting the way her Marines had come to view her leadership under pressure. "We voted on it," Rodriguez explained. Sticky 6 was about syrup and accidents. Steady 6 is about staying calm when everything goes sideways and making sure everyone gets home safe. Sarah felt tears threatening as she looked at the faces of the Marines she'd led through combat and brought home safely. These weren't the same young men and women who had questioned her authority when she first took command. Combat had forged them into a team that trusted each other completely. The mystery of Nomad 7 was never officially resolved, though Sarah heard rumors over the years about special operations units with extraordinary capabilities operating in remote areas of Afghanistan. She never learned whether her guardian angel was military, civilian, or something else entirely. But she carried the memory of that night for the rest of her career. The knowledge that sometimes help comes from unexpected sources, that leadership is proven under fire rather than in training, and that the bonds forged in combat transcend questions of gender, background, or initial doubts. Years later, when Sarah had her own command at the battalion level, she would tell young officers about the importance of earning their Marines' trust through competence and courage rather than rank and authority. She would speak about the weight of command decisions and the responsibility of bringing people home safely from situations they never expected to face. And sometimes, when the audience was right and the setting was appropriate, she would tell the story of Nomad 7, the mysterious guardian who appeared when 3rd Platoon needed them most, made impossible shots under impossible conditions, and then vanished without explanation or recognition. The story always ended the same way. Leadership isn't about having all the answers or being perfect in every situation. It's about staying steady when everything goes wrong, taking care of your people, and being worthy of the trust they place in you. Sometimes you get help from unexpected places, but you can't count on miracles. You can only count on your training, your Marines, and your commitment to bringing everyone home. Sarah retired from the Marine Corps as a colonel, having commanded units at every level and served in multiple combat deployments. She never encountered another situation quite like the defense of Observation Post Bravo, but she carried the lessons of that night through every subsequent challenge. Her final fitness report contained a note that she kept framed in her office. Colonel Chun exemplifies the Marine Corps values of honor, courage, and commitment. She has consistently demonstrated the ability to remain calm under pressure, make sound tactical decisions, and inspire confidence in subordinates during the most challenging circumstances. Her Marines would follow her anywhere. The call sign Steady 6 followed her through the rest of her career, a reminder of the night when a ridiculous nickname about spilled syrup became something else entirely, a testament to leadership under fire and the bonds that connect Marines who have faced the ultimate test together.